Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Adrian Vanvleck. We've been chatting a little while about getting this one together. It's an honor to have you on. And this is going to be a fun intro. So you are the high wizard of fitness at Fitness Nerd Online, which I enjoy. That's super cool. I recently had Josh Taylor on, so for anybody listening, you're going to get a couple in short sequence that are probably going to be in this domain. But you've actually trained people for 16 years between in-person, you're now fully online, you've trained trainers, and a big part of your world is your Facebook community, the Fitness Nerds Forum. So again, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
Good. All right. Are more nerds now interested in fitness?
Yeah, I think so. I had to really kind of think about this, just kind of ahead of time. I think because how old are you? What are you for? I think I saw in another episode you're like 45 or something like that, right?
47. Yes.
47. Okay. So I grew up kind of playing video games. You know what I mean? Like I started with like SNES or even like Nintendo at first, and then I've grown up with that, right? And I think that like there's a lot of people now who've just grown up playing video games and they have this background and they're now wanting to kind of get into fitness. They want to feel better. They're just aging, right? And I think that's a huge thing that we're seeing. But more so, I think we've seen like a big, I think like pop culture and like the whole sphere of being nerds from superheroes to anime has like broken into mainstream. I mean, if you look at like thinking about back at the Japan Olympics, how many Olympians were either dressed up as like characters and show, and not just from Japan, but all over the world. You know what I mean? That was a super cool thing. And we're still seeing like professional athletes doing that now, showing up, whether it's Noah Lyles, the sprinter, before he sprints, he pulls out his Yu-Gi-Oh card for like the blue-eyed white dragons. I mean, like, it's coming this thing where it's become so much more mainstream and acceptable. And I think it's allowed people to kind of like just, people who are nerds or maybe more, who may not have been into fitness, be like, hey, there's other people out there who are like that, who are in fitness. And it's become this, not just these polarized black-white identities anymore, but something that's kind of merged together, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I grew up playing sports, but I also grew up with video games and Dungeons and Dragons. And I remember, I'm young enough, or I'm old enough, and I was young enough at the time that there was still this like fear over Dungeons and Dragons being associated with like devil worship and all this like not so shit. But like the same thing was true of Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne and like some of the hardcore heavy metal stuff in the late 70s and early 80s. So there's a lot of fear based around there. Anybody younger is going to be like, are you kidding? This was very real at the time. And I think you're right. I mean, now what do we got? We got Henry Cavill being Superman and Geralt the Witcher. My Witcher figures are right up above me here.
Oh, yeah.
All of the superhero Chris's, Hemsworth, all super jacked. And I suspect that Marvel in particular was a really big driving force for this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like going through high school and seeing like superheroes brought to life, that was probably the first break into that. You know what I mean? And when I was in high school, like when I was getting into anime, I had to get everything just on like VHS, you know what I mean? And like, that's where I was like really into it. And kind of what you're saying, like it was also the two like domains were very separate, right? And I would like a lot of people, like when I was growing up, were like bullied for it. Now it's so much more socially acceptable. Like I started coaching like high school sports, and I was joking with one of the kids like on a Saturday, like after a game. I was like, "Oh, what are you going to go do now?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just going to go home." And I was like, "Oh, you're going to go watch Solo Leveling?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go watch Solo Leveling." Like it was something that he was just like, just kids are into and everybody's into versus these two separate things. But Marvel for sure is the breakthrough of that to like really kind of push that into the mainstream. Because Marvel movies have been out for how long now? I mean, like almost like 15 years, something like that.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, well, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, you know this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love. Auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? And while Macros First's premium version is incredible for any user, the basic version, which is nowhere near basic, is free to use. So you can go to either the Apple Store or Google Play to download. Well, if you think about it, they go back further because you've got the early X-Men movies and Spider-Man, all that stuff. And those things were huge. Right? So we're talking almost 25 years of this stuff. How important is it for prominent figures in our world? And I think Dr. Mike Isertel and the whole RPT, and there's a lot of Dragon Ball Z imagery over the years with those guys. How important is that to normalizing it so people can come out of the closet as nerds, basically?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, right? Because I feel there are at least like from like I'm much bigger into like anime, so like speaking about that, there's just so many great stories or great anime of like the hero's arc of like training and bettering themselves, and there's so much inspiration. Dragon Ball is a huge one, right? But like even more recent, like My Hero Academia, Solo Leveling is like gamified version of that. So there's all these like stories that we're seeing, but people coming out and supporting it, and like the nerds watching that stuff and being like, dude, I've always wanted to, you know, be cool like Goku or strong or train with these people. And then now we have other people we look up to who are adopting that and, you know, just sharing it. It's definitely allows people to feel okay in their own skin, to want to venture out and do these things, you know what I mean? And to participate in fitness without feeling bullied or harassed. So like, hey, I'm like this guy too, right? And anytime we have that kind of familiarity, I think it's going to be more accessible to other people where they're like, oh, he likes doing that too. That's okay for me to be in this space, right? Like that's a huge thing. It's just about any kind of like lowering the barrier of things is just that like that we are like you also, and that kind of common ground that may not necessarily be fitness related, but just because you have tangential things that gives people kind of space to be like, hey, you know what? It's not so bad over there. I'm not going to get bullied for doing this thing, or maybe I can do this, you know?
What about the other way, which is getting the people who traditionally have grown up in gaming, all the nerd culture stuff, who maybe didn't play sports? How do we reach those people with the fitness side of stuff?
Yeah, I think I really think that there's a lot of people. Fitness can do a lot, not just make us feel better, right? But and I'm sure you're so aware of this, of just fitness being community driven, fitness being a way for us to feel more confident about ourselves, right? And there is a lot that whether it's since the pandemic or when, where we feel more distant from people, there's a lot of that seeking like other kind of community. And I think that fitness is a way for a lot of people to have that. But there's a couple things when we surveyed, when I was really like creating the group, my space for people, a big thing that we surveyed and looked at, like what's kind of like a turnoff, right? And I think a huge thing that's just a turnoff to like, I don't want to say like nerds as a monolith, but like in general was this kind of gatekeeping and elitism, right? Where there's a lot of people who may be coming into this space because like me, I was bullied, you know, like I was bullied, and I used to play a lot of like really play competitive Magic growing up, and our Magic the Gathering. And like I stopped for a long time because I didn't think it was like socially something that I should be doing anymore. And like, you know, you should grow out of it kind of thing. And now I'm finding myself getting back into it. But it's having these kind of like, whether it's it's gatekeeping of fitness, being like, yeah, you know what, walking isn't fitness, or these other kind of segments that are kind of pushing people away. I think that's a huge withdrawal, and making it so that way, hey, yeah, you know what, you're new to fitness too, you know, like that's okay. And this is a safe, you know, safe space. This is a welcoming space for you to get into fitness at this easier level. So eventually you can train like Goku, right? But that's something I think I see a lot of, and was definitely really prevalent when I was like when I used to really deeply survey my group about like things I really hated, was that sense of like elitism and gatekeeping, because it's so, I think, similar to like bullying also.
This episode is brought to you by Renaissance Periodization and the RP Hypertrophy app. RP is the industry leader in muscle building, coaching, and education. And this app is like having a coach in your pocket. It gives you everything you need, including training programs, form videos. It gives you all your sets, reps, and weights, so you just show up and follow the plan. It adjusts each week based off your progress. And the app was created by Dr. Mike Israetel, Nick Shaw, and the team at RP, who I've known for many years. And the entire team are incredible people who've always been supportive and generous with me, so I know their character and are easy to endorse. My library contains several RP books, and I've used RP training principles in my workouts and coaching with my clients for many years, long before the explosion in popularity of their YouTube channel, which is worth checking out. RP is the first sponsor I felt remotely comfortable endorsing after over 7 years of podcasting. And if hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to maximize your gains and take the guesswork out of your program. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got a serious discount for you of up to $50 US. Go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes, and that's rpstrength.com/coats. Use the code COATSRP. What are some other examples, ways that elitism, gatekeeping manifests? And maybe for the coaches or the enthusiasts listening, I mean, I'm not one of these people that like thinks, oh, we got to be so careful about every goddamn last thing we do for fear that we may inadvertently. I think that stuff gets taken too far. Is there anything that people may innocently not realize could actually negatively impact someone else's access?
Yeah, let me think. Like with a lot of people entering fitness, you know, one of the most common fears I think that we just run into, right, is that like people don't feel like they don't know what they're doing. They're just constantly being stared at, right? I think it's very easy for people when we're talking about like gatekeeping, at least from this standpoint, and people being like scared to go to the gym. Any way that we can kind of lower this sense of like, I don't belong here, because everybody has the idea that like, hey, I'm a nerd, I may not belong in the gym, right? And if we can, anything that we can do, whether it's that like representation, like what you're saying of like superheroes or Dragon Ball Z, and even at a gym that I'm going to now in San Diego, like their shirts have, you know, Dragon Ball on it. And while it's like a gym that's really heavily for like bodybuilding and other things, there's still tons of that like superhero theme around that would make people feel more welcome to be there, right? So that's one, that would be like one thing. And I know it's kind of tied to like what we were kind of mentioning earlier. And I think another thing would be, man, I hate saying like form elitism, and this is going to sound really weird, but like as people are like encouraging people to improve on what they're doing, but just because they're not doing it right, just bashing people out of the gate. And that's something that like I've seen a lot in my group and sometimes online, right? Is whether it's because somebody's more overweight and we're like, you know what are you doing? You're not, you know, super shredded and lean. Are you even working out kind of thing? Or it's a sense where like, you're on this journey to progress and somebody's learning, but somebody comes in right away and like, hey, your form is shit. And your form is awful and everything doesn't look good. So why are you even trying, right? Like encouraging people to be like, yeah, you're working out, you're training hard, we can be better, sure, right? But not just like beating somebody down right out of the gate as a way to like deter them, you know?
I like the forum note because quite a while ago, I really got onto people like Adam Meekins and Alex Sterner, who I've had on the podcast, and a number of other really smart strength coaches and physical therapists. Sam Spinelli's great for this, Susie Spurlock. Anybody's listening who's really interested in this, I've had a lot of these, Katie Dabrowski recently.
Yeah.
And there's a very strong message there that evidence just does not support the idea that there's an objectively bad form versus a good form. And it's all really embedded in load management. Yes,
Yeah.
a trained eye can for sure tell, okay, there's probably a skill deficit, there's too much load, and that may
Yeah.
manifest as something that we might say, okay, that's probably bad form. But there's a lot, the rounded back deadlift is a very good example. Yes, I can identify when an inexperienced person is just grabs a barbell, they're not braced, and it looks like a dog taking a shit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't love that. But realistically, there a lot of the top powerlifters will actually lift in a braced but rounded thoracic spine position at the very least. And there doesn't seem to be strong evidence at all that there's an increased risk of a back injury based on your form there. And there are good people who will argue with you all day
Yeah.
long on that, but
For
just
sure.
the evidence just isn't strong there. So I'm with you. I want to make people feel like, hey, the form probably doesn't matter all that much, and there certainly isn't what I think strong evidence to support that there's an increased injury risk there. It's all really in, are you using load you can control, and are you making reasonable increases in progress over time instead of just trying to do too much too fast, right?
Yeah, and I think there's this stigma, right? I mean, this is a discussion without getting like a sidetracked into this in our group about literally that, about form and recovery time and how hard people are training. But it is so easy for somebody who's new, who's been told like form and form over again. Just if they share a video, they walk into a gym, their fear that there's going to be reprimanded. And I don't think people are going to verbally accost somebody, right? But there's just that fear that they're like, hey, I don't belong here, or I shouldn't because I don't fully know what I'm doing. And we want to encourage people to get better, but that doesn't mean they should be elite on day one, right? Like everything takes time for them to grow and to improve and to progress.
And I think people are also more afraid than ever that someone's going to film them and make fun of them. And I
Yeah.
think, I
Yeah.
mean, does that happen? It's rare. Uh, but what's happened is Joey Swoll has become such a big popular figure online that when he shares these videos, they get, incredible reach. And there's obviously some really
Yeah.
nasty incidents surrounding that I think it overrepresents the frequency that this even happens.
Sure.
I mean, I've worked out in commercial type gym spaces for 25 years.
Yeah.
I have worked in them for 15 years. And I am unaware of a single incident where, and I mean, we're talking pretty full time here. Now I coach a
Yeah.
bit more of my time in my home basement gym, but I'm still in commercial gyms. I still work out in them. I am unaware of an incident where someone in one of those gyms, or even locally, ever filmed someone without their consent. It got online and there was shaming or anything like that. So I just think that we have a much greater sense of the risk and the prevalence of this than the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I spot on agree with you with that. And there definitely is, I can see like fear from that. Yeah. I've had like, as kind of what you're saying, I haven't been in gyms as long as you, but I've been in gyms for, over 2 decades. Right. And like, it's still like, I had one person said it kind of happened to them. Like, and that's out of like, the 30,000 people who are in my group and everybody I've ever met like it's so incredibly rare, but it is a fear. It's like spiders, right? Like we're like definitely afraid of spiders.
It's kind of like shark attacks, right? Versus
Yeah,
car
yeah.
accidents, right? It's like you go to your 30,000 person group and ask how many of them have been in a car accident in the last year,
We're
right?
terrified. Yeah, we're
Right?
terrified.
I mean, I bet you anybody, this is going to be morbidly awful, but there's probably people in that group who are no longer alive who've had a car accident the last couple of years and died in a car accident. I know that's horrifying.
Just a
And
number of, yeah, unfortunately.
more common than a filming incident in that group sample size. Now, let's flip it again. How can we make more room in our lives to enjoy guilt-free the nerd culture passions while also retaining boundaries around our, the activities that promote our physical health, which includes, cooking healthy meals or gaining access to them and working out, being active.
Yeah, man, boundaries is kind of like a funny thing. I was listening to I don't know what the podcast was. It was my wife was listening to it and I like overheard it. And there's this line about boundaries that like boundaries are things that we set that other people it's we who are enforce it versus somebody else, right?
Mm.
And I think that what happens with a lot of people, whether it's like just boundaries in general, is they set a boundary and hoping somebody else react like oh, like
Mhm.
I'm going to do this thing and they don't respect my boundary. But a lot of people just don't even enforce their own kind of boundaries, right? Like, and this is kind of what I mean by this, right? If I said like a boundary is, hey, I'm talking with my wife and I'm going to be working from 3 to 5 p.m. And if something happens that is an emergency and you come over, I might just ignore you and just keep working for 3 to 5 p.m., right? Like that's my boundary. So she still might come in. She's her own human being with her own world and her own things. It's not right for me to be like, you have to remember everything that I said, but my boundaries, if I'm like, this is the boundary and they come over, I'm the one who kind of enforces it. It shouldn't be something else that somebody else does, right? And that's, I think, where when we're talking about this, a lot of people don't do that. They just kind of hope that other people respect this list of things. But, you're your own person, right? You're like Adrian. The appointment to, our chat today is at this time. Here's the scheduler, right? If I showed up an hour late, right, would you accommodate me? You're like, no, you have other stuff you got to do, right? That's your boundary. But like, I think a lot of times we don't have, where people aren't good at just kind of like enforcing it, and they just let people walk all over them, whether it's their own. I mean, food's, I think, a tough one because of food pushers, and people don't feel good saying like no to other people giving them food and things like that. They feel it's like that's a tough one. That's actually one of the hardest things I think people struggle with are like food pushers. But in general, a lot of people just, I don't think they establish what their boundary is for that stuff, and they just let people come in willy-nilly. And if anything with fitness, I think this is a huge thing with fitness, is a lot of when people are new and they don't schedule like times for fitness or like set it aside and they just kind of hope it's going to happen, it like rarely ever does, right? And that's something I've seen so often with so many things, where if they're not establishing like, this is when I'm going to do it, here's how I'm going to do it, they don't create like that, like whether it's a schedule or a boundary with that stuff, it just rarely ever happens because it's just left to the randomness of somebody's day-to-day life, and it's just not going to happen that way.
Is saying you have a boundary at other people and expecting those people just to adhere by the boundary a way of deflecting from responsibility for the effort?
No. I mean, well, actually, maybe.
I think it is. I think it is.
I mean, man, there's definitely like probably self-sabotage and like some other self things going on there, right? Where I wonder how much of it too is like people's own aversion to like conflict, like, so this is a tough one. So like I have a family member who's chronically late to things, and we're trying to like, they're chronically late to things, and they asked to go watch me play lacrosse the other day, right? And I'm like, sure, you can come. I'll pick you up. Here's the time I need to be there at, and if you are past this time, I'm just gonna go. I don't want to be late. I'm older now. I need my warm-up time. Like, I don't want to get hurt. So if you're not ready by this time, sure enough, called them ahead of time. They said they'd be ready. I got there. They weren't there. And I mean, they weren't ready by the time I got there. I waited. The time hit. I left, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, they were like, hey, where are you? And I'm like, I called, I waited, I honked, I came in, I spoke with you, but you weren't ready and I left, right? A lot of people in that situation, what you're saying, whether it's because of how they feel about their relationship with somebody or just aversion to conflict, would wait, right? And that's where I'm saying like the boundary thing is they don't enforce it themselves and they just let people kind of walk over them. But I definitely can see some people, kind of what you're saying, use it to abdicate their own responsibility of things. Like, oh, this person never does this. And you're like, do you really want them? Like, do you really want that boundary there? Or are you just kind of using it as a deflection? That's a good one, actually. You know what? That's tricky. Have you ever had that conversation with somebody and like brought that up?
I'm trying to think of an example because my mind got hijacked by the whole thing where I have a bit of a history of dating Jamaican women, wonderful human beings, but
yeah,
I mean, there's a stereotype there, not like being on time late for stuff. That's real, at least in my small sample size. So
no, it's similar. I'm half Brazilian, and it's the side of our family. It's like, so it's like a similar, like just chronic lateness kind of thing.
I was kind of
Yeah, so nothing springs to mind, but I think in general, very, very prevalent with people.
Yeah.
They make token efforts. And I think there's a variety of reasons. I think some people are out to prove that they're not capable of doing the thing that they want to alleviate the emotional discomfort. I believe that's a very big problem. I think that shows up in New Year's resolution setting in a very big way, because then and if anybody's heard me say this on air before, I apologize, but they'll go and set an unreasonable goal, expectation of themselves where they don't possess maybe the skills or
Oh yeah.
The experience to do it at that level. And then they'll white knuckle it for a while. And eventually it breaks down. And subconsciously, they pretty much knew they would, but they set themselves up to fail. And I think this is not always, but I think this is common. And then what happens is they can say, well, I tried. I am just not the type of person. We actually kind of have a fixed identity problem there. I'm not the kind of person who can do this. I'm not a person who can do fitness. I can't eat this way. And what it does is it temporarily alleviates the emotional discomfort, the creeping discomfort about how someone has felt about their health. Maybe they've gotten some metabolic health scares. Maybe they're not happy with their body image, and they've done something. But now that, oh, look, I've generated proof that I cannot do this.
Yeah.
But eventually that discomfort creeps back up again. And then some other juncture or scare or warning or New Year's again gets them to try it all over again. And my hope is we can always get access to that person, show them a different way, teach them the skills and tools, build their confidence. And then they realize, wait a second, I actually am capable of this.
Yeah.
Let me bring this back around. I think we've tackled a pretty good job of, how do we get the nerds into the fitness realm? Yeah. So let's pivot. Okay. There's a quote that I pulled from your media.
Sure.
The problem is that everyone thinks they should only have green lights all the time, but life happens. Sometimes we hit a red light and we get mad. We can't do what we did at the green light. End quote. Talk to me about this. I love this concept.
Yeah, this is actually from Dan John. I was at a conference and he was speaking, and he had this thing where he was talking about expectations and how expectations can really hurt people, right? And he gave this analogy of a bus stop, or a bus bench, like a bench at a bus stop and a bench at a park. And he was like, if you're at a park and you're sitting down on a bench, you're just kind of taking everything in, right? Like if 5 minutes pass and nothing happens, it's not a big deal when you're at the park, you know what I mean? Because you're just kind of enjoying the moment, But if you're at a bus stop and you waited 5 minutes and you haven't seen a bus, you start to get a little anxious, you know what I mean? You're like, okay, it should have been here 5 minutes ago. What's kind of happening? And people have that kind of experience, not with bus stops, but with results and with what's going on with their life, right? So and he literally uses this, where I got the Stoplight thing from. This is probably one of the most common conversations I have with clients, is just talking about a stoplight system and Dan John kind of mentions it where, just imagine a stoplight, right? Yellow, red, and green. Green, we can move full speed ahead, be incredibly aggressive with our goals, pull out all the stops. You might have, in his word, 2 to, or maybe 4 to 3 months. I mean, not 4, sorry, 4 to 8, 12 weeks a year that you can just go hard for the average person, right? Not for somebody who's maybe is a professional athlete or but a general person, right? So you have this window where everything in life just is kind of aligned and you can go hard, right? And just like a light, full speed, go right through the light. Don't have to worry about anything. We live most of our life in yellow. There's stuff kind of happening. Things are good. You can move forward, proceed with caution. But for the most part, you're getting results. Things are cool. We're not being ultra aggressive and moving forward. And then there's going to be another, 4 to maybe 12 weeks a year, maybe 8 weeks, that's red, which is everything is wild. This might be you're on holidays. If you're working with a tax person, tax season, right? There's a taxing of a client right now who's in finance, and they're there's some American tax deadline coming up, and they're really, really hammered right now with work. So you have these periods of time where things are going to get really busy for people, right? The problem that people run into is they assume that they should be in that green light situation all the time. right? So just like if you're going to work and you hit a bunch of red lights, it's so frustrating. You're like, oh my gosh, I hit another red light. I got to be there in 1 minute. What's going on? And it's their expectations of the situation that shoot them in the foot. They go, I can't do it anymore. They put their hands up and quit. That is a super, super common thing. And if you talk with most people and you just ask them, like, if you just didn't regress over the last 2 years and all you did was stayed where you were, you made results, stayed where you were, made results, stayed where you were, where would you be right now? Most people, like general population, would be like, I'd be like 20, 30, 40 pounds. You know, they'd be in such a different world than they would be. But so many people, when things get really pressed, they fully give up, right? And like I tell people, and this is a big thing that I do, that I mention, and people may disagree, I talk about identifying minimums and just doing that. So like, and our minimum is going to be different for everybody. And I think about this as like another kind of segue into like discipline, which is like, we want to do this thing super consistently, right? So for some people, it might be just having vegetables. Like my minimum for fitness is going to be 7,000 steps and two 30-minute workouts a week. Cool. That's what I'm going to hold you to, right? That's it. Or it might just be just steps. Hey, I'm going to hit my step count. And if I get workouts, cool, right? But we want people to identify like what is something that they can do no matter what happens. Now, I've been in fitness for a long time, and I'm sure you have too, that even if like the world's on fire, we'll find a way to get to the gym, right? It may not be the best workout in the world, but I'm like, I can like count on two, like, you know, my hands, how many workouts I've missed, like in the last, 10 years of like, that wasn't like, maybe I was not because I was sick, but like just because something was going on in my life. You know what I mean? Like I'll move my schedule around, make it work, make it happen. I've just been doing it for 10 years. This person has been doing it for a year or, a couple of months. We need to identify something that's on that level where they're like, yeah, dude, just get in 2 15-minute workouts. Here's these 3 band exercises you can do in your room. Do it twice a week, but just stay committed. Stay committed to at least this minimum. So when things open back up and you get into yellow or green again, you're ready to move, right? Versus just abandoning the plan overall.
This sounds very close to how I like to think in terms of seasons. And I think it's the same thing where we're just getting clients to understand you can't and you shouldn't expect, you use the word expectation, to be able to live at a red line all of the time.
Yeah.
And being able to downregulate, and again, hit a bare minimum, or at the very least, there's a number of famous quotes. I've seen Hormozy talk about this. I can't remember the exact one, but effectively, if you train yourself to only start when you have an abundance of time, then you're invariably going to, say to yourself, well, when things get busy, I'm going to stop. So it's teaching certain amount of bare minimum at the very least when things are hard, when things are busy. And then when you have increased room, time, whatever, you can expand your capacity. And I also think that dieting, and that might be a tricky word for some people, but like modulating your nutrition, whether we're in, a deficit with the intentional goal of losing body fat or maintenance or what have you, or eating in a calorie surplus to grow, there are going to be times where we can actually be pretty on track with that. And there are going to be times where I don't think mentally, time wise, we're going to have the bandwidth. And like you said, and this is a tricky one. This might be contentious, but I believe that for a lot of people give themselves permission to do the things that they want to do. And I like this concept because the word permission, even if it's a little bit, that's what I'm looking for, provocative, it means you have power. It means you have authority in this situation. And so when we recognize that we are granting ourselves permission to do certain things, which includes the off behavior, it means that we actually are in control of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's people who feel like their autonomy is taken away from them when things get really busy, but that's not always the case. It's like we still have say over some aspects of what's going on. And like you're saying, like, I think it's empowering for people to be like, yeah, I'm still going to give myself permission to work out 2 times during this and not feel guilty about it, right? Not feel like shame and I think when we're talking about general population, especially like where where they're trying to make this fit in, or just nerds in general, they're trying to make this fit in with other aspects of their life that they're like, you shouldn't feel guilty if you're taking 15 minutes twice a week. And yeah, that might be 15 minutes from your family, but it's going to make you feel better long term, right? I think it's such a totally different concept when we're talking about like whether it's nerds or general population versus somebody who's getting ready to be on stage where this is their sport, you know, or like, and we have different levels of like expectations for them as well. And like what they expect out of themselves, you know, that might be like almost like a second job for them, or like a second kind of purpose for them, right? Well, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think this comes back to what you're saying earlier about the gatekeeping, where there are people with messaging that say you have to sustain a certain level, or else there's,
yes,
you're not part of the tribe.
Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, there's something like that happened the other day in the group, and this is like somebody was like, and this is not a common situation, but this happened in our group where somebody was like, they physically for some reason have a difficult time deadlifting, and they're like, I've always seen somebody say that the deadlift is the best exercise, and that if you only can do one exercise, you should do a deadlift. They're literally like, so I just haven't worked out in a long time. Whether that's like a real thing or an excuse, you know. And I was just like, the only thing that's mandatory about fitness is your commitment to bettering yourself with fitness. You know, you have to show up like that is, and then over time things will get better. You know what I mean? But there's definitely a sense of like whether it's like if you're a man, you need a, bench press 225, run an 8-minute mile like that. I've seen that stuff circulate a lot. Or anything, there's like these like there's gatekeeping elitism that happens that I think definitely is a barrier for people to be like, well, why should I even do that? I can't do these things or these minimums or these other really wild expectations of like never have any sugar or, only eat organic food. Like there's a whole litany of these things that I think really kind of keep people out.
Do you think that this messaging is often a way for the people who are broadcasting these elitist messages for them to feel better about themselves, where they may be struggling with some stuff and they've sort of cherry picked an arbitrary set of things, be like, well, I can do this, I'm good at this, therefore I'm going to make this a part of my identity?
I would say that's probably a case for a lot of people. I think genuinely that a lot of people think it's motivating too, and I don't think that they see the other side. That this message they perceive to be motivating, because it's motivating to them, is incredibly demotivating to another whole totally group of people. And that is, I think, a really common thing that happens as well. Is there like there's going to be some people, right? Like some really hard-nosed people who are like, hell yeah, brother, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to push it. I'm going to get my miles in. I'm going to get my bench press up because I see that. And then there's a whole other group of people who are like, why should I even try, right? So I think it has a lot more to do with this isn't to say that we should all be the same color or coach, right? Like I work a lot, I see a lot of those people who they get demotivated by those kind of messages. And that is mostly who my population is. That is a lot of who my group is. Because again, like whether it's being bullied or elitism or gatekeeping, that why they find their way into our group and why they stick around. But I just don't think people even get that there's a whole other perspective out there that can interpret these situations. And I think that like they're just, whether it's insulated from it or that, but I definitely think there are some people who are like you who feel better. They feel like they're patting themselves on the back for sure.
You made me think about GLP-1 agonist medication, the messaging around this stuff. I've noticed a funny thing.
Sure.
So Serena Williams recently came out and said that she used it. And of course, it's almost like all sides of that discussion have been equally awful. It's really weird.
There's no winner. Yeah. Everybody's a loser in this conversation.
I'll try to actually explain what I mean here. So there's the side of it that actually starts to, shame Serena Williams because they're like, oh, if, you've only had more discipline and more, blah, blah. It's like, this is literally one of the greatest pro athletes of all fucking time. I don't think she's short on this discipline, like mental game for this stuff, right? That's fucking ludicrous to me.
Oh my God.
But here's the flip side of this. I know Jordan Syatt did one of his personal experiments. And anybody who knows Jordan's been doing this shit for forever.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how he tried, I can't remember which GLP-1, but he basically did it for, I think it was a month. And you sometimes also have Dr. Mike Israetel, who's been on before.
Yeah.
And listen, Mike's wife is Dr. Crystal Guevara, who is one of the leading authorities on GLP-1 agonist medications. She's a close friend. I was just with them like a week and a half ago in Texas. And my guess is, so first of all, Mike has been very bullish and excited about the potential benefits of these drugs outside of just for, diabetes and fat loss, right?
Sure.
And I'm not an expert in this, but I know there is emerging research on it having positive effects on maybe some sort of other addictive behaviors.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And so I've seen people who are like not thrilled about Mike saying some of the stuff. Like Mike's basically been sort of encouraging, or thinks that a lot of people outside of the people who are obese, diabetic, pre-diabetic, et cetera, will probably see some benefits from this. And I jokingly think that Crystal's probably going to smack him upside the head if he's saying things that are actually inaccurate about it. But there's actually a lot of pushback at someone like a Jordan doing what he did, not being categorically who these medications are for. And there's almost an interesting moralism there too. And there's the policing of this stuff. And I just find that the entire side of this stuff has actually been almost awful. And there are people who I like on all sides of it. I don't always agree with the things people say that I like them, but I don't get it. I'm not going to stitch a video of someone I'm like, I really like this person, but this is a good opportunity for me to dunk on them. Fuck that shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so actually I participate in clinical research trials, and I actually had to do an oral, it was an oral version of, I can't say the company's name, but like an oral version of like a GLP-1 that like they're trying to come to market to. Granted, like I was in the study for like it was a tolerance test. So like I'm in literally the final arm of like this trial, and I'm getting like the maximum dose they like, like the dose that they're like, you're going to get side effects. Like I was in that kind of arm, and I felt awful. Like it was bad, but also like, I got to feel what it was like to like eat a half a sandwich and be like, I'm so full right now. Like I don't even, like my brain doesn't understand what food is. Like, and it's weird in a trial because you have to eat, like you have really rigid times that you're like, this is your eating window. So if you don't eat now, like that's your last meal of the day. I can't go to the fridge and eat when I'm hungry. It's like, nope, you're cut off in this study. So like I would just try to, I would eat just a little bit more, and I would be so nauseously full for like 7 hours. I would be like sitting there like, why did I do this? So I feel like, which is, I didn't need to be on the medication, or at least, me, myself thinking about it, but they need healthy participants. So I got to see what that side of it was like. And man, it was rough. It was at least like just having to eat, like not think about food. And granted, it is a clinical trial. So I'm like stuck in a medical ward for a while. I was like 30 days long. I was like, I couldn't work out for 30 days. I was like trapped in this ward doing this study, but it's tough, man. Thinking about like with other people though, it definitely gives me like realizing how much people have like food noise, right? I think we just have in general talking about like, I mentioned earlier that it's so difficult for other people, to like possibly understand what somebody else is going through. Like we don't know how much effort it could have taken Serena, how much food noise, and how like she could need 5 times the level of discipline that I need to do the same outcome of purpose, and she could just be that overly committed in this thing, but we'd never know because I'm not her and I don't live in her body, right? So like when I was doing the clinical trial, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't think about food, I don't care about food. It made me realize for myself like how much food noise I have, and then realizing that some people probably experience this thing dialed up to 11. You know what I mean? Like they just really experience it. And I think it's tough because it's so easy to point the finger and just be like, they don't want it, which I feel like talking about like just bullies and gatekeeping in general happens. And there isn't this like understanding with somebody that like, yeah, this person might be having just a harder time because of, their hunger cues are just, the second we start to reduce their calories down, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that we may not experience because we've just never had that experience.
I believe my understanding about the role of genetics and obesity.
Yeah.
has really been clarified since all the discussion about GLP-1s and food noise.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually the crux of one of the biggest parts of the difference in genetics between people. And you get the people who will show a picture from the 1970s or the 1920s or whatever, and be like, "Oh, look, there were no obese people. See, it's not genetic, right?" It's like, no. Here's the thing: different food environment, 100%.
Oh yeah.
But if you have someone who's got a lot of food noise, but you don't have, and I also think that food noise, our experience of it is overwhelmingly hijacked by combinations, super normal combinations of fat, salt, sugar, plus the advertising, the psychological dopamine, dopaminergic stuff, and that hijacking. The people with the genetics that make them more vulnerable to this stuff are much more vulnerable to it.
Yes.
And I believe that's where the genetics shows up. And that's why we did not see anywhere near as much like the population demographics, let's say the 70s and before. I think that actually largely explains it. I also think that a big part of the genetics is the way people respond to increases in food, whether or not their need goes up. You get two people, I have this conversation with clients all the time when we're making small increases of calories. And it's like, okay, cool. We're going to track a lot of data here, but you might put 250 calories into your diet and your metabolism may literally absorb them all through upregulation of need. You just might be like more active. Or you could be the person who doesn't see any change in that whatsoever. And those 250 calories, I mean, if we're working out and training hard, the goal is to have it go to muscle. But if we overshoot, it's going to go into body fat. So, and I believe those are probably, I'm oversimplifying, I know it, but I think those are two of the main ways where genetics differentially shows up between people. And I have a lot more sympathy and empathy and understanding than ever for the person who struggles with food noise, because I couldn't understand this concept because I didn't experience it the way that other people have described. And if anybody really wants to get into this, again, Dr. Crystal Guevara messaged me. I will literally hand you the episode because it's really good. And she talks about her own experience. And, you know, like, it's wild. The way she described living was just not something I'd ever experienced. And I think until you hear someone describe that and how powerful and ever present, omnipresent that food noise is, you can't know. And then I get really annoyed when I see people. Honestly, I think both extremes are bad. I see the people who post the genetics. Hold on, let me remember this. Obesity is, there's no genetic relationship at obesity, and then it's all genetics. I'm like, no. No, there's nuance in between. Okay, like it's Or I know what it is. It's the obesity is a choice versus obesity is not a choice. That's the one that pisses me off. It's like their extreme is true. Knock it off. Like these are quick clickbait nonsense for social media.
Yeah, no, I agree. Speaking of that, like same trial, like I'm a huge caffeine person. You know, like yeah. Well, good thing it's the white one.
I'm holding up a white monster. Jesus Christ,
yeah. So, and when I do these clinical trials, I can't have caffeine. So I have to, you know, like I will wean myself off it. But when you're there, I'm literally like in a medical ward, right? In this specific one, it was 30 days. And there's only some foods you have access to. So I can't like snack. I can't do anything. And I always tell people that like, when we're talking about like what it was like to live a long time ago, I'm just locked in a room that I don't have these luxuries. I can't just go get pizza. It's not an option at all for me, right? And because it's not there, I don't even think about it. And yeah, when I'm there, I don't really think about caffeine. I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice, but I literally cannot get it. You know what I mean? It is, unless I walk out and leave and, you know, leave the study, I just can't do that, you know? So food environment is just one of these things that, I don't think we realize how powerful it is. And especially, I think a lot of times, I know you're talking about like the dopamine, like, you know, addictive like foods. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but like, I always want to press that like companies spend billions of dollars to get you to eat stuff, right? And that they wouldn't spend that money if it didn't work. You know what I mean? And like, that is something that these companies are spending money for advertising, for locations, because they know it gets people to eat that food, right? And it gets people to do these things. Doesn't affect everybody equally, but again, that's not how, it's just more people in society are going to do these things. And there's billions of dollars they're making from just because of advertising and being around and on social media, and it's everywhere. It is just everywhere, you know?
The height of where food is in a grocery store at the checkout dramatically affects how much you buy, right?
Oh,
Heavily
man,
studied.
There's a book this is called
Nudge.
The Way We Eat Now.
Oh.
And there's a line in it that's like that we're the first generation of people, like, you know, we used to be like hunter-gatherers, but we're one of the first generation of people that food companies are like pursuing us, right? We've never had to worry about this before, but we're like the first generation where it's like we're being advertised to, like we are the target market, like we are the hunted ones, you know, not literally in that sense, but we're the ones that are being pursued and after, when before we are the ones pursuing kind of the food. And like that was I remember reading that and being like, what that, like that is a really good point, that Bill, in terms of how much money is being spent, the eye level stuff, the amount of science that goes into every single thing about that is really wild to think about. And then just to be like, oh, it's because you don't have enough discipline. It's like, dude, this company's spending gajillions of dollars to get me to buy this thing. You know, it's gonna pick off, you know, X amount of us just because of what they're doing.
And scale that out across it's not the only domain this shows up in.
Oh,
all advertising, then all of our interactions with devices, all social media, but device in general, with the dings and pings and notifications.
For sure.
If you get into, you know, like a place like a casino, sweet mother of God, the money, the testing and engineering. I think it's Michael Easter's book Scarcity Brain. He opens up and he talks about there's this casino that the public can't get in, and it's just literally for testing the engineering of all this stuff on how to maximally get people to stay and to play games, right? So your point is the hijacking of our, you know, I guess the limbic system, or this dopaminergic environment that we're in, is heavily invested in. Another example of this is BJ Fogg's classes. I can't remember where. He's the guy who wrote Tiny Habits.
Tiny Habits, yeah.
And brilliant stuff. I mean, obviously James Clear's Atomic Habits was just a more effectively written book that was more accessible. Therefore, it was far more popular. But Tiny Habits is also really good. But BJ's a legend in the Silicon Valley tech space, and a lot of the graduates, people who do his classes, went over into working into the social media companies because they use a lot of this stuff. And
like
that
the little buy-ins, the little commitment to get you like on, like there's something like with Facebook, like when you join, that if they can connect you to like 5 to 10 friends, like right out of the gate, your ability to stay on the platform was like exponentially higher than if you didn't have any friends, you couldn't really use anything. So their goal, at least for Facebook, was to like, for Meta, was to be like, can we get you to get 10 friends in the first 3 days? Because that's how they knew that like once you're in, like you're in it for a long time. Yeah, I can 100% see that BJ Fogg and like having that effect on people.
Yeah, I think, I feel like it might have been Michael Easter's book Scarcity Brain that went into that stuff. I know there was this thing about the casino, maybe the rest of it, but I know it's popped up in books. Now you got me thinking, because like you go on Facebook and what do you get? It's like people you may know, right? Instagram, it's people who you should follow, but people you may know. And it always freaks me out every once in a while. It's like, well, first of all, I do know these people. I do not want to be Facebook friends with them. And it's like, I was 15 meters away from this person, you know, yesterday in, you know, a gym or a public setting. And now like Facebook is telling me I might know them. I'm like, what's going on there? I wonder why, right?
Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, there's some, not a discussion for this, but there's some, there's definitely some wild stuff that happens with Facebook and Meta and all that. So
one last thing, quote, whether you count calories or not, calories still count. The tool you're using to count calories is triggering for you. One of the tools, not all of them. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, man. I think there's a lot of people who give advice to other people based on like how they feel about themselves, right? I think there's this need that we all want to like help each other. And like, this is the way I did it, so it should be helpful for you. But I also feel that there's a lot of people who give advice about whether it's like calorie counting or other things, where they have like a negative situation where they're like, this was triggering for me, so you shouldn't do it because it'll be triggering for you, right? And I see that with whether it's like talking about like weighing themselves or other things. And there is a whole, you know, without getting into like the deep psychology of it, I think that with weight and weight shame and all that stuff, I think it's really prevalent that But some of the tools that we use, are going to be flat out triggering for people, right? Whether it's because of relationships they've had or other things. And when we're talking about this, I think a lot of times people just are like, well, if I can't, at least in this situation, this person was like, well, I can't, if I calorie count, they get into this race to the bottom kind of situation. And which I'm sure you might have met people who just do that, right? They're like, you need to be in a deficit. So a bigger deficit is a better deficit. So only eat this little amount that you can. And when they can see that number, I feel like they tie an emotional kind of response to it. And they're like, I'm either good or bad based on the calories they're consuming. And we see this with weight gain stuff too, like weighing themselves. Some people can't disconnect that, hey, this is just gravity, but they attach themselves to it. Like I'm a good person or a bad person based on how the scale is. So when I'm talking about the logging and things being triggering, it is on everybody's own. Like if somebody's on this weight loss journey or body composition journey, they need to find a tool and a system that works for them that isn't triggering to them. And we all know that calories are going to matter for weight loss or weight gain, right? And if we don't have this tool, this tool specifically is causing issues with you, then we have to pivot. We have to move. But that doesn't mean that calorie counting in general isn't a great thing, There's what is it? The National Weight Loss Registry. This is at least from a book I really enjoy, which is Diet Cults. And they go into the National Weight Loss Registry and talking about how when the National Weight Loss Registry was I don't know exactly how long I read this book in 2013. So I don't know how up to date this information is, but it was National Weight Loss Registry is a group of people who've lost over, I think, 30 pounds and have kept it off for a year. So they recorded all these behaviors that these people did, right? And the goal of the registry was to be like, well, what are they? Are they all doing low carb? What's happening, right? And they found that people just made everybody made a diet change, but it wasn't the same diet change across the board, right? So they knew that they just made a change. But one of the things they found was that people didn't eat, and this is from what I'm trying to recall from the National Weight Loss Registry, was they didn't find that people ate a wide array of foods who were successful. They had a limited amount of things that they would circulate through that they know how it would impact them. So if you can't count calories, right, but you eat the same several food items every day for a week, we know for rough amounts, we know that whatever calories that is, it's X calories, right? And if you're not losing weight, if we adjust those 7 foods and some behavior just a little bit less, then it's going to be less calories than whatever you're consuming. So we have systems to indirectly count calories without having it to be this is 1,800, this is 1,900 calories. Mike Dola talks about how it's just an algebra question, right? We're solving for variables we may not know. And as long as we can solve for X, we don't need to know what A and B are, as long as we can get this equation to kind of balance out that X is less than, right? So there's many ways that people can do versus just throwing their hands up and being like, I'm just going to, cut out carbs completely. And that's going to be or I'm going to go keto or veganism. Everybody wants to or so many people, they do this, I call it a lateral pivot versus a moving forward kind of thing where they're like, I'm going to go do this other kind of diet and then this other kind of diet and then this other kind of thing versus finding a way to move forward. And in this particular quote, I'm talking about building systems. Whether it's following a food plan, weighing the foods, but not logging it, doing the PN, precision nutrition, anatomical size kind of thing, relative to your palm or thumb or whatever. We need some way to know what we're doing. So we know doesn't matter how many calories it is, it's X calories, and then to consistently do that so we can make an adjustment to it. That's a big way that at least I kind of think about that situation.
That makes sense. I mean, I like the underpinning of this is calories are true. The science of it is true, whether you believe in it or not.
Yeah.
And whatever tactics you've used either are successfully or very unsuccessfully hitting the calorie goals you need. It's the person, and again, this is so cliche, it's so low hanging. It's the person who's I was in a calorie deficit, I didn't lose weight. It's no, motherfucker, you were definitely not in a calorie deficit, right? You are not a scientific anomaly that needs to be studied, right?
100%.
All right. People can find you they can follow you at Adrian Fitness Nerd Forum, all one word, right? Anywhere else you want to direct people to, including your Facebook group.
Yeah, man, if you want to join the Facebook group, I know Facebook's a group for old people now, but we tend to be a little insulated place for things like in the group where we try to be super positive, really uplifting. So the group is Fitness Nerd Forum, and then there's, I think it's for gaming, superhero, nerds, and anime. But if you just type in Fitness Nerd Forum, you'll find it. We're super welcoming to people. Even if you're a trainer and you just want to come in, that's cool. We just say, hey, you know, as long as you're not soliciting, you want to share and help out. That's such a cool thing for everybody. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm in there, so you guys can come in at like every once in a while I'll see something and I'll like try to give a nuanced reply to it.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of it. Like it's such a positive place. Every once in a while somebody goes, you know, completely sideways, and then there's some sort of like either a loud departure or a bad hammer, but I find that's the minority of it.
Yeah, it is. It is a real minority, which is, I think, a big thing. So like, that's where I think Facebook versus Instagram, like Facebook's groups, right, is such a great way just building a community and such a unique thing. But like forums aren't as, I mean, forums are just a lot different, right? But like having a community where people can go and to feel welcome, talking about building and taking down barriers and accepting people. We made this so that way people can feel welcome, you know, that like, hey, if you're a nerd, this is where you can come and feel welcome. I always kind of think of it like Cheers, kind of like people can come and be okay coming in and everybody knows your name. And it's just a welcoming space where we can talk about both the worlds of being a nerd and for fitness. So yeah, man.
And anybody who's listening to this who may have found the podcast through you and the community, I've actually had a number of guests and episodes I think you guys would love. So I'm going to throw a few out. Recently, I had Josh Taylor. We talked a bit about gaming, and then my buddy Ben Mudge. And Ben is a big Warhammer guy, so we get into that a little bit. And then I think if you're really interested in, especially for the female listeners, some of the evidence-based stuff around maybe the misinformation around weighted vests, menopause, and cycling, and what have you. Amanda Thebe and Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple had a couple of really incredible recent episodes. Just scroll a little bit. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky was on here not too long ago, and we talked a fair bit about GLP-1 agonist stuff and food noise. But I would say take a scroll through, you'll probably recognize a lot of the industry's who's who that you really love. I would love to have you guys as regular listeners. And if you are someone who's a regular listener and you really like gaming side of stuff and the group sounds great, go join the Facebook group. I'm in there and we'll have some fun in there. Adrian, thank you so much. This was a real treat. And everybody tuning in, I've got a big one coming up for you next episode. Thanks, guys.